I'm Scott Peasley, this is Wild Generation, and it's been raining for 3 days. We're gonna take this one match, and I'm gonna show you how to light a one match fire in the rain. It's better to find wood that isn't on the ground. Wood that's been elevated will be less wet than wood that's been saturated in wet leaves during the entire rainstorm. So if you can, find some stuff that's been elevated but is dead and down. So obviously everything's wet. The reason I'm not wearing a rain jacket even though it's raining out is because of the fact that I don't want a spark to get a hole in it. So we have our tinder, which is this stuff right here. This is a dead gray birch tree. It's drier on the inside and it's got layers to it. It's better to use white birch, but for the purposes of what we're doing today, this will light pretty easily. Then we have our kindling, which is, you can see, incredibly thin. And the reason for that is that we want the most surface area to the smallest amount of wood so that it will burn very, very quickly. Small sticks doesn't mean that sticks are short. Small sticks means that they are thin. So you can see how incredibly thin these are. So you can see here that we have a log cabin design. I've elevated it off the ground with a rock. The idea behind that is that the ground is gonna continuously have more and more water that's just gonna get sucked toward the fire as water gets burned off. So what we wanna do is we wanna elevate it off the ground, and as the rock dries, it'll just dry. Now there is a risk if the fire got hot enough that the rock could crack as steam tries to escape the rock. But right now we're not actually gonna build a fire that is that large that we have to worry about that. So before I get started, I wanna make sure that I have all my supplies ready. I have my very small kindling sticks, which you can see fit and will stay. They're long enough over the top of this. I have my tinder, and then I have larger sticks that I'm gonna add on top. So I'm not going to put anything in here to light my fire. I'm gonna light my fire out here. There isn't a lot of wind right now, so the goal is to light this on fire, drop it in, and then add more on top of it as we go. I don't want stuff on the ground for too long, and frankly, it's kind of hard to get in here to light. So you can see I've chosen this fairly dry piece right here. I'm actually gonna break off a couple more small pieces. Yeah, it's nice and thin at the top, so there's very little that needs to get lit on fire to ignite this, right? So I'm gonna start with this piece, and we're just gonna build up from there and see how many pieces we can light on fire simultaneously, because they'll start to heat each other and keep the fire going. There's a little bit of wind right now, but I'm trying to show you what I'm doing without letting the match go out. So we have some ignition. Light on fire. Put a piece in here now. Take this piece and add this to it. So then I'm going to start using the structure on the sides to make sure that the flame doesn't go out. If you lay something directly on top of something else, there's a very strong chance that it could go out because you're removing the oxygen. So I'm using the structure to try to give some breathing room to the fire. We're going to add our tinder on top. We're going to put fuel where fire is. So we're not going to try to make the fuel, or we're not going to try to make the fire go somewhere. We're just going to put stuff on top right where the fire is. And the more fuel you put on top, as long as there's room for it to breathe in between, the more likely it is that something will catch on fire. So we're just giving the flame a whole lot of options of things to ignite. So you see how it's coming out on the side here, so we're just going to follow that and add more fuel there. And you'll notice that the wood starts to actually look wetter. That's because the water is coming out of the wood. So it's going to boil the water out of the wood, and then once the wood is dry, it'll ignite. Gonna start feeding the fire. Oh no! Disaster has struck. It's okay. It's okay. Still good. If you haven't seen the episode of When You Should Blow on a Fire, this is definitely one of the times you should blow on a fire. So we have all this coal base. I'm gonna recollect the coal base back together so that it can feed on itself, and we're gonna reignite it. You ready? There we go. We're almost starting back over from zero here. There's a really nice setup, but I moved the camera a couple times to try to get you guys some different shots. And I wasn't paying attention to what I was doing, and we lost what we had. And we're going again. So now that that's going again, we're gonna build this out. We're gonna start building a teepee shape, sort of, around the outside of this. And actually reuse some of this wood over here that never got burned. And we're just gonna start angling the wood and building out our teepee shape. And anything that's too small to be part of the teepee, I'm just putting on top. So if stuff doesn't snap, that means that it is probably not good to go on the fire. Even though everything's wet, I'm not looking for green wood, I'm looking for wood that's been dead for a little while. If you notice, I have not stopped working on this because I really want the wood to dry out. So what I'm doing is I'm adding layers upon layers so that as the fire warms the wood toward the outside, it starts drying it out before the flame even gets to it. So you can see it takes a lot longer to build a fire in the rain because you have to boil out all the water in the wood before the wood can ignite. So the trick is to put an excessive amount of wood on and then allow it to warm up, to boil out that water before the flame even reaches it, and then it ignites when it gets there. I hope you enjoyed watching this episode of Wild Generation. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing. It does really help me out. Get out there, try to do one match fire, probably in dry conditions first, and then once you do that, try it in wet conditions.